It's Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. Trump wrangles support for his big, beautiful bill. Joe Biden hasn't had a prostate exam in how long? And a thought experiment courtesy of some really dumb kids in New Mexico. Next on the AM Update.
Look, the alternative is a 68% tax increase.
There's just published a research paper about this big, beautiful bill, and it's going to do wonders for the economy. We find that it's going to boost GDP as much as 5%. It's going to create as many as 7 million jobs.
Here to say the conservative media was right and conservative media was correct.
We have a different standard based upon the color of somebody's skin. Would that be acceptable?
Well, I'm not the one arguing that. Apparently you are, because you don't like the fact that they're white, and that's why they're coming.
What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
President Trump visited Capitol Hill yesterday to wrangle Republican support for his big, beautiful bill. That's the budget reconciliation. Here's the pitch that he made to troubled lawmakers who are still on the fence about voting for it.
Look, the alternative is a 68% tax increase. And you can blame the Democrats for that and one or two grandstanders. We only have one or two, but we have tremendous support. But you'll have a 68% tax increase, or you'll get a massive tax decrease. You'll get a tax cut, the likes of which we've never had before. This is bigger than any Ronald Reagan tax cut. It's even bigger than the tax cut that I gave, because as you know, that's being extended and increased.
Trump had some very testy words for one representative, that would be Thomas Massie of Kentucky, saying that he doesn't know anything about government and he thinks the voters of Kentucky should vote him out of office. This is just I hate the situation because I love everybody involved here on some degree. You know, from people like Chip Roy and Thomas Massie's perspective, Chip Roy has been pretty cautiously skeptical, I should say, and he's been pointing out some of the good things in this bill. But from their perspective, they're looking at this. We have a generational opportunity to really reset the board here in terms of reining in spending and reining in all of these just runaway programs, if not now, when? And then I think from the White House's perspective, their response is probably, yeah. If not now, when? You know, just from a slightly different perspective. Hopefully, they'll be able to sort their differences out here in the coming days. Stephen Mirren is the director or the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. He did a media blitz yesterday talking about a new paper the Council of Economic Advisors has out on this new budget plan and just what they think it can do for the American economy.
The Council of Economic Advisors just published a research paper about this big, beautiful bill, and it's going to do wonders for the economy. You can find this paper on our CA website, on the White House website. We find that it's going to boost GDP as much as 5%. It's going to create as many as 7 million jobs, and it'll boost take-home pay for a typical family of four by $8,000 to $13,000 per family, right? So this is huge. This is real money, and we got to get this bill over the line so we can realize this. And if we don't get it over the line, it's going to be the biggest tax hike in American history and drive the economy into a deep hole. So we got to get it over the line.
At the Oval Office, President Trump made this announcement.
I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors. And Canada has called us, and they want to be a part of it. So we'll be talking to them. They want to have protection also. So, as usual, we help Canada do the best we can. This design for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years.
So from the Golden Dome to a golden shower, that would be the narrative surrounding Joe Biden's golden showers in terms of we're being urinated on. The narrative surrounding Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis continue to unfurl. A Biden spokesman said yesterday, prior to Friday, President Biden had never been diagnosed with prostate cancer. I saw another source saying that President Biden, former President Biden, president in air quotes, of course, Biden, hadn't had a prostate exam since 2014. It's amidst this backdrop that a very contentious interview on the Megyn Kelly show between her and Jake Tapper and the other author of that new book out about the cover-up of Biden's mental decline. It's amidst that backdrop that this went down, and you'll never guess what Jake Tapper tries to pull at the end of this clip.
Leading up to the debate, which you anchored, that June 27th debate, 2024, there was a ton of news leading into that debate in that month. And we look back at your coverage and found that you ignored it. Not only did you ignore the Jackie Walorski moment when you had him 13 days later, but you ignored the freeze up that he had at the Juneteenth celebration. You ignored what happened at the G7 when he wandered off and Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, had to go find him.
This is just absolutely brutal. Megyn Kelly taking down Jake Tapper right to his face for his complicity in the cover-up, which he writes about in his book, Original Sin. This goes on for another 60 seconds. Here is how Jake Tapper responds.
We'll acknowledge that after I was named co-moderator of the debate, I tried to make sure that my coverage was fairly vanilla, both about Trump and about Biden, because I just wanted to get to the debate. And, the Biden people and the Trump people, I'm kind of frankly surprised that either one of them agreed to have me as a moderator, because both sides disliked me so much.
Sure.
But yeah, I remember that moment. And I remember that moment, the glitch at the immigration event, and not getting much attention outside of conservative media at all. And Alex and I are here to say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct, and that there should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with.
I beg you, please do not fall for this from Jake Tapper. If he really believed that, if he really thinks that conservative media, that right-wing media, was right about what we were claiming regarding Joe Biden, that means that he would need to resign in disgrace. He and his co-author resign in disgrace. Journalists across the news media spectrum resigning in disgrace. Because we got it right, and they turned a blind eye to it. That's seppuku-level shame that should be felt across the mainstream, the legacy media that he now seemingly is willing to throw under the bus. Going to need a little bit more than that from Jake Tapper. A couple of Senate hearings yesterday involving a couple of high-level Donald Trump cabinet appointees. Neither of them came to play games. First, let's start with Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, testifying in front of a Senate panel regarding the acceptance of South African Afrikaner refugees.
Statutory phrase says you are entitled to entrance as a refugee if you demonstrate a well-justified fear of persecution.
No, you're not entitled.
So can you have a different standard based upon the color of somebody's skin? Would that be acceptable?
Well, I'm not the one arguing that. Apparently you are, because you don't like the fact that they're white, and that's why they're coming.
I'm just asking you to say that would be unacceptable.
Well, no, I would say that the United States,
a very easy thing to say.
The United States has a right to pick and choose who they allow into the United States.
Even based on the color of somebody's skin.
You're the one that's talking about the color of their skin, not me. These
are
people whose farms were being burned down and they were killed because of the color of their skin. Well, you've demonstrated enough because you think anyone should be allowed into this country for any reason because they met a certain criteria.
Who has said that?
We are going to prioritize people that come into our country on the basis of what's in the interest of this country. That's a small number of people that are coming.
But you said this weekend that there would be more. But in other cases,
it's harder to vet.
That is Secretary of State Marco Rubio sparring with Senator Tim Kaine. You remember him? He was Hillary's running mate about 9 years ago. Here is RFK Jr., HHS Secretary. He's getting combative again with Senator Patty Murray for all the right reasons.
You can go.
And I also want to point out.
I have just 2 minutes left. I asked you a specific
question. I want
to
point out something, Senator. You presided here, I think, for 32 years. You presided over the destruction of the health of the American people.
Well,
our people are now the sickest people in the world.
Seriously.
Because you have not done your job.
Seriously. That is an
what have you done about it? What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
Mr. Secretary,
what have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
Seriously, Madam Secretary, I would ask you to hold back.
Seriously, Mr. Secretary. Stop telling me that I am absolutely worthless and have never accomplished anything in my career. Seriously, Secretary. Quickly before the break, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has launched a comprehensive official investigation into the review of Biden's catastrophic 2021 Afghanistan withdrawal. He said in a memo, quote, President Biden's administration led a chaotic withdrawal of U.S. military and embassy officials from Afghanistan that led to the deaths of 13 U.S. service members, 170 civilians in a suicide bombing at the Kabul International Airport's Abbey Gate. President Trump and I have formally pledged full transparency for what transpired during our military withdrawal. The Department of Defense has an obligation both to the American people and to the war fighters who sacrificed their youth in Afghanistan to get the facts. This remains an important step towards regaining faith and trust with the American people. So now we have a comprehensive and official investigation into Biden's botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. When we come back, we have an assimilation update from the state of Florida, a comedian on just what he thinks the impact of all those podcasts Trump appeared on during the election season, and we have a thought experiment thanks to some incredibly dumb kids in New Mexico. We'll talk about that and more next. This is a report from WFOR-TV in Miami.
Don't feel well. This woman, who we will call Maria, says she did not want to use her real name, concerned she could be targeted. But she does want people to know her story.
No deseo ir para atrás.
She told us, I don't want to go back. She's the mother of 3 children who are American citizens. She asked us not to show them. Maria arrived from Honduras in February of 2005. 2 months later, she had an order to leave the country after not appearing at a hearing, but she never left. I asked her why she did not go to the hearing.
Yo le dije al oficial, yo no tengo familia.
I told the immigration officer I don't have any family in this country or a specific place to stay. She told me she entered the U.S. through California.
Pero en ningún momento me llegaron ningún documento.
I never received any document, and they did not know where I was going to be. This month she received this letter at her house in South Florida. She has been fined for more than $1.82 million.
That is a report from WFOR-TV in Miami detailing an illegal alien who has been here for 20 years, has 3 kids, had them in the United States, and thanks to that bogus doctrine of birthright citizenship, those are 3 U.S. citizens, her kids. She's been here for 20 years, had 3 children here. They interviewed her at her house in Miami. So, 20 years illegally here. A house in Miami and 3 children, and she still can't speak English. The assimilation is strong with this one, and now she's got deportation orders, or at least that's on the horizon, and faces a $1.82 million fine for failing to leave the United States. So no English after 20 years. Well, it's in that vein that the U.S. Department of Transportation announced a new directive yesterday to make sure that English proficiency is actually a thing when it comes to the trucking industry. In a statement, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said, quote, America first means safety first. Americans are a lot safer on roads alongside truckers who can understand and interpret our traffic signs. This common sense change ensures the penalty for failure to comply is more than a slap on the wrist. The new guidance is in line with the President's April 2025 executive order that strengthens highway safety by ensuring that all commercial drivers are properly qualified and proficient in English. In April, Secretary Duffy announced steps to rescind a dangerous Obama-era policy that dismissed ELP requirements, that'd be English language requirements for truck drivers. So that's a good thing, I think a positive development. And now here's this. This is comedian Tim Dillon being asked by a CNN reporter by the name of Ellie Reeve if he thinks he's part of a new media establishment. Listen very closely to his reply here. I think you can kind of tell, maybe you can kind of tell, he does not take this question seriously.
Do you feel like you're part of a new establishment that's being created?
I don't think I'm part of a new establishment. I think it would be pretty difficult to look at these podcasts. I know it's a popular thing right now, especially in certain media circles, to say that after running an incredibly unpopular candidate who is introduced very late in the race because an elderly man who could not be the president, who everyone told was functioning as the president for 4 years, decided to, this wind is wild, huh?
Yeah.
See? But this was a very specific circumstance in which Kamala Harris ran for the presidency.
Yeah.
She was somewhat unpopular, and she was not a star in Democratic politics before this. at all. And her communication strategy was pretty weak. I think most people have admitted that. So to hang this defeat all on a few podcasts and to say that they were the problem, I just don't buy the narrative. So I don't think I'm a new establishment. If you weigh, again, a few comedians with podcasts versus all of the people that supported Kamala Harris, Democrat donors, billionaires, big people. If the idea is that me and a few comedians have more power than multi-billionaires, huge media institutions, a whole political party apparatus, I just don't think most people are going to buy that. I think it seems like a great way to excuse running an unpopular candidate on a platform that American people weren't sold on.
But I think even beyond politics, though, even beyond the question of the election, again, I know that the liberal Joe Rogan conversation is so dominant, and I think not nuanced enough, but there is power in a massive audience.
There's absolutely power in a massive audience, but if you're saying that power is equal to the CIA or all of these other people that have been very critical of President Trump, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that the power that Theo Von has would be equal to the intelligence agencies or these massive legacy media institutions seems crazy.
But you got way more audience than when you're saying we don't have power, we're not the CIA. Well, there's some gradations between that, and also I'm sure there's
Well, just you use the word establishment.
Yeah.
I didn't say that we didn't have any power or that audiences weren't powerful. But when you use the term establishment, I think that's more than just having an audience. That's having an institutional component that I don't think we have. But I think legacy media does. I think the government and the intelligence communities do. I think Hollywood certainly does. And I think all of those people, all of those power factions have worked together for a very, very, very long time. So to say that a few comedians with podcasts equal that seems crazy.
I see why.
There it is. He just says it at the end. I'm becoming more and more thoroughly convinced that non-established, I should say, not to use the same term that CNN reporter used there, that non-mainstream comedians like Tim Dillon, like Theo Von, which maybe they are, at least for part of the country, mainstream or seem mainstream now, but they didn't come up through the typical ranks of just performing and kowtowing to mass media. They kind of built their own thing. I'm becoming more and more convinced that these are some of the smartest people actually in the room right now. They may not agree with every jot and tittle of policy. In fact, they might disagree with us on a lot of things. I mean, we just played a clip from comedian Andrew Schultz. That was one of my favorite appearances that Trump did during the election season last year, appearing on his podcast. He's a comedian, and he was talking to Bernie Sanders like, hey, you're not left-wing enough for me. I wish you would have burnt down the Democrat Party because I've been a lifelong Democrat and I hate this party. That's him. But these people are a lot more in touch with reality than the power brokers at the institutionalized kind of establishment that Tim Dillon was talking about there. And just going the absolute crazy premise that a few comedians with podcasts played some role in helping elect President Trump this last round. The idea that just because that happened, they're the new establishment. They're more powerful than George Soros. They're more powerful than academia. That's just nuts. When we come back for one final segment, a thought experiment, maybe a moral dilemma. What would you do? We'll talk about that next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I think I've talked before about one of me and Bella's favorite shows. In fact, probably our favorite show, especially during the summer, is the show called On Patrol Live. It's like Cops, Cops, just following police officers and seeing them do their jobs on Friday and Saturday nights live. That's what it is. It's a lot of fun. Now, this show had its original iteration. It was called Live PD. I believe it was on A&E. And this show would actually follow police live, critique them even sometimes live in real time. And then St. George Floyd happened. And then that show got canceled. Thank you very much. In fact, in a place like Texas, in the aftermath of St. George Floyd's death, Governor Greg Abbott actually signed a bill into law that bans programs like On Patrol Live from making police-oriented documentaries in the state of Texas because racism or something. And Greg Abbott was just overtly trying to virtue signal. Anyway, a couple of years go by. The same production company that made On Patrol Live decided they wanted to do Live PD decided that they wanted to do a new show, basically a ripoff of the old one called On Patrol Live, and that's what we have now, except it's not quite the same. Again, thanks to St. George Floyd, this new program is just complete and total pro-police propaganda. Still very entertaining, but they never criticize the police officers on that show. For example, just the other night on Saturday night, there was a police officer from South Carolina towards the end of the show, so this is around 10:30 at night, who went on a completely naked, not naked like clothes off, but it was just nakedly a power trip against somebody. Now that somebody was being very disrespectful, was running their mouth, but this police officer stretched the definition of a lot in a pretty obvious way and made it sound like he was pretty obvious that he was power tripping. The old version of this show, they would have critiqued that police officer, but not this new version of the show. They're not doing that. And again, thanks to George Floyd, it's now complete and total police propaganda. Nevertheless, they do have some interesting segments. And like I said, we love this show, even though we know it's pro-police propaganda, because we can critique it ourselves in real time, like I just did with that example from South Carolina. They have a segment called A Triple Play. And one of the segments, it just features really kind of eyebrow-raising police pursuits, police activity from around the country, not necessarily the departments that they're following. One of the segments that they aired this weekend came from New Mexico, where police officers responded to a call of two young boys, aged 7 and 9, who were just out in the open playing with a real loaded gun. Here's what that sounded like.
Go ahead and put it down for me, okay?
You're not in trouble, but you have to drop that and come talk to us, all right?
If there's a magazine inside the magazine well,
put it down, baby.
They're playing with the gun back and forth. The one in the blue is trying to take it from the one in the orange.
Put it down, baby.
Just drop it, buddy.
Put it down, babe.
It's just so bizarre. These kids are 7 and 9. They're in their pajamas. One of them is wearing Minecraft pajamas. The other is wearing Star Wars pajamas. And they're just not listening to these police officers.
John, can you just toss it to the side, babe? Let's make this easy. Because we want to help you. We want to help you.
I want to try to do a warning, something.
Put it down.
So it's around this time that police officers decide, hey, let's get out the less lethal.
I really don't want to record a kid right now.
Let's get out the less lethal rifle here and see if we can send a warning shot. And you could hear the officer say, I don't even want to fire a less lethal round at kids, at children, 7 to 9 years old.
40.
So there they fired a less lethal round. One of the kids, the younger kid, actually got the gun up and fired a shot at the police officers. But the child's gun thankfully malfunctioned. Fired another less lethal round.
Drop it now. Drop it, both of you.
I don't even have
So police officers were basically able to bum rush these two children and take them into custody. Now, the show On Patrol Live quickly revealed that where these kids are from, the house that they are from, I believe they said police had been there 50 times in recent years for various reasons. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. When they started talking about and kind of reviewing this case, the cast of On Patrol Live immediately started talking about, imagine yourself in the officer's shoes there, even firing a less lethal round. If you completely and seriously injure that kid, that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. Now, I recoiled when I heard, I think it was, I can't remember, it was Captain Tom Rizzo who said that. And I said, no, you don't have to do it this way. You could wait him out, maybe find another method. That's just completely taking the police officer's side, just kind of knee-jerk and from the word go. But then I thought, those kids had a real gun, and they fired a real bullet at these police officers who were trying to just tell them to drop the gun and they'd be okay. In that case, if I were a police officer, I'm not going to deprive put a chance that I would deprive my own children of a father because somebody else's father sucks. Somebody else's parents suck. And obviously did not raise those kids correctly. So it's kind of a dilemma here. And not being in law enforcement, maybe less lethal is basically the only way to go there. Is there anything such as tear gas? Any other method? Could they have waited longer to try to negotiate with these children and try to get them to listen and obey? I think this is an interesting moral dilemma because, I mean, I've said this before. Being a police officer it's an impossible job. You are the cartilage in the knee between complete chaos and some semblance of order. It's an impossible job. Okay, so I totally understand that. I'm not trying to do police propaganda myself here. It's just a weather forecast. I'm kind of torn about this because on the one side, you know what? You don't have to do anything. You could have waited a little bit longer. Even less lethal with children 7 and 9, that could be permanently damaging. But then on the other hand, like I said, why should I deprive my children of a father because another kid's father sucks at raising him? You see what I'm getting at here? That's the topic of this week's poll of the week. You can go vote at Real AM Update on X if you were in the position of one of the police officers in what we just heard. And I tagged the posts in this thread. If you were one of those police officers, what would you be willing to do? I gave you 3 options: less lethal, deadly force, or neither. Comment below. That's going to do it for Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.